The baby shower froze as the deputy read Kaylee's name off the eviction notice. Her mimosa slipped. Daniel, Linda's only son, went pale. "This is a legal eviction," the officer announced, loud enough for the neighbors. Linda, the baby's grandmother and the rightful homeowner, just smiled. In her hand, a gift bag, baby blanket on top, court order beneath. What could drive a mother to evict her own son and pregnant daughter-in-law in front of their guests? Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The yarn slid between Linda's fingers like water as her eyes lifted, heart caught between disbelief and something deeper, shame. Her son, Daniel, once a boy who used to run to her when his knees scraped the sidewalk, was now a grown man with his hand wrapped tightly around her wrist. He didn't raise his voice. It was low, sharp. "Get up. That's her seat." Linda blinked. I said get up," he hissed, glancing at Kaylee. His pregnant wife stood behind him, arms folded, a soft smirk tucked into the corner of her glossed lips. Linda caught it. That smirk. Around them, the crowd quieted. Guests who'd been sipping mimosas or adjusting pastel onesies on diaper cakes now froze in place. A Spotify playlist hummed in the background, something breezy and cheerful, but Linda couldn't hear it over the sound of her own pulse thudding in her ears. She rose slowly, the baby blanket still warm in her lap. Her hands trembled as she held it tight to her chest. "Of course," she whispered, her voice cracking like thin ice. Then she walked, not hurriedly, not dramatically, just quietly, out of her own living room, out of the baby shower that was hosted in her own house. No one followed. Upstairs, in the master suite she'd given up after Harold died, the walls still bore the faint outlines of her husband's military medals. She shut the door gently, not bothering to lock it. Her hands ached from the crochet hook's grip, but she didn't loosen them. Instead, she crossed the room, kneeled beside the old cedar chest tucked under the window, and opened the steel folder inside. Her breath hitched. The deed. Still in her name. Only her name. She traced the embossed lettering with the back of her knuckle, the way she might have once traced Daniel's jaw as he slept in his crib. He used to have the softest cheeks. He used to call her mama even when he was too old to. But that boy, she realized now, was gone, replaced by someone who couldn't stand the sight of her occupying his wife's moment. The welcome sign downstairs had read, "Celebrating Daniel and Kaylee. Home is where the baby is." No mention of Linda, not even a "thank you mom" tag on the RSVP. She'd made the spinach dip herself, stayed up until 2 a.m. decorating pastel napkin holders. Kaylee had later announced it was store-bought from Costco. Earlier, Kaylee had leaned close to a group of women and said, loud enough for Linda to hear, "I just don't want outdated advice. We're doing gentle parenting, not her generation's style of yelling." Linda had smiled politely then. She'd smiled through the sting. But this, the public arm yank, the whispered command to vacate a seat in her own home, this wasn't something you smiled through. She sat on the edge of her bed now, the silence pressing in like snowfall. Through the floorboards, laughter floated up from the party still unfolding below. The scent of buttercream frosting clung faintly to her clothes. She picked up the baby blanket again, smoothed the last row. She had stitched it with a rose border. Kaylee's favorite flower. Linda used to bring Kaylee bouquets when she first joined the family. She'd even given her the master bedroom so she could be comfortable during pregnancy. Comfort, apparently, had turned into ownership. The blanket slipped from her fingers onto the carpet as Linda reached back into the folder and pulled out a second document, a home appraisal from 5 years ago. She made note of the equity, of the untouched mortgage, of the single signature in the owner line. Her hands stopped shaking. She folded the blanket, placed it neatly beside her, and opened the drawer of her nightstand. Inside, a ballpoint pen, her planner, and a faded business card. Reed Allen, estate law. She'd kept it all these years, just in case. Linda stood in her kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator nearly drowned out by the pulsing laughter and clinking glasses drifting in from the backyard. The scent of frosted cupcakes and smoked pulled pork clung to the air, but her own plate sat untouched on the counter. She stirred her coffee, black with hands that didn't shake, though she suspected they should have. 30 minutes ago, her only son had grabbed her by the arm like she was furniture in the way. She didn't cry. Instead, she took a slow sip of her coffee and leaned against the counter, facing the sink. Her house, her faucet, her silence. No one came in to check on her, not Daniel, not Kaylee. The only sound that followed her was the echo of her own name left off the welcome sign, replaced with scripted calligraphy, "Welcome Baby Fields," hosted by Kaylee and Daniel. Linda glanced toward the hallway leading to the master bedroom, the one she'd given up 2 years ago when Daniel moved back after the funeral. "You two take the big room," she'd said back then, standing in her widow's dress, still smelling of lilies and antiseptic. "It's just me now. I won't need all that space." She hadn't even kept her husband's dresser, just one photo on the nightstand. Just the memory. The last straw hadn't been the seat. Not really. It was everything leading up to it. Kaylee's voice trailing through the house, half joking with friends. "She's a little much, right? Always offering advice like it's 1952. And worse. She means well. But I just wish she'd stay out of the way." Linda opened Instagram, fingers steady. Kaylee had posted 4 stories. The balloon arch, the mimosa bar, the gifts stacked high. The caption under a wide shot of the living room made her freeze. "Our home is ready for baby boy now nesting our home." Our home. She could almost hear her husband scoff. Earl used to joke that the drywall had their fingerprints sealed into it. He'd sanded the hallway trim himself, painted the baseboards in his old navy sweatshirt. They'd laid the tile in the kitchen over one exhausting 4th of July weekend, back when Daniel was 8 and eating freeze pops shirtless on the porch. Linda walked to the bookshelf and pulled down her old brown leather planner. It smelled like dust and peppermint. She flipped past old grocery lists, faded appointment reminders, until she found the name she'd written once before but never called. Reed Allen, estate attorney. She underlined it. That night, she opened her calendar app and added one event. Call Reed, 10 a.m., Monday. Then she deleted the alert. No reminders, no flags. This wasn't for attention. This was armor. Downstairs, she could still hear music. Someone yelled, "Don't forget the group photo." A burst of laughter followed. Her laugh used to be the loudest in the room. Now it wasn't missed. She padded down the hall, feet bare, the carpet cool beneath her soles. She passed the guest room, her room now, and opened the drawer beneath the bed. Inside was the fireproof folder she hadn't touched since the funeral. She traced her name on the deed again, this time like it was a promise. Then came the knock, firm 3 times, the kind of knock that carried anger just under the surface. She opened the door just a crack. Daniel stood there, red in the face, cheeks puffed like he'd been holding in the wrong words for too long. "Kaylee thinks you're trying to ruin her moment," he spat. "Apologize." Linda stood at the kitchen sink with yellow gloves up to her forearms, rinsing remnants of cake frosting from a porcelain platter she'd owned since her wedding registry. The laughter outside was thinner now, guests trickling out like confetti losing steam. From the corner of her eye, she saw Kaylee dump the half-full tray of her homemade spinach dip straight into the trash. No foil, no offer to keep it, just a quick toss and a nose wrinkle. "That tasted store-bought anyway," Kaylee said to a friend as she slid a Costco tub into the fridge. Linda's fingers tightened around the wet dish towel. The same dip had won a ribbon at the state fair in '96. She didn't say a word. Later, while taking out the recycling, Linda spotted something strange wedged between 2 cardboard boxes near the bin, ceramic shards glinting under porch light. She knelt and sifted through them carefully. Her favorite vase, pale blue, hand-painted with lilacs. She'd brought it back from a little artisan shop in Maine 20 years ago. Kaylee had told her last week it clashed with the nursery color scheme. Apparently, it clashed with the trash, too. Linda didn't pick up the pieces. She stood and walked back inside, her shoes crunching faintly against the scattered gravel. Upstairs, the guest room door, her door now, clicked shut behind her. She paused near the vent, where sound carried clean through the ductwork. Kaylee's voice drifted up from the living room below. "She'll need to move out once the baby comes. There's just not enough space, and honestly, it's not good energy." Daniel mumbled something in reply. Kaylee kept going. "We need our own rhythm, our own family." She had her time. Linda moved quietly to the fireproof box beneath her bed. She pulled out folders one by one, tax records, mortgage papers, utility bills in her name. Then came the deed, her name only, no amendments. She traced her signature, the date etched from 3 decades ago. The next morning, when the house was quiet and Kaylee had left for a prenatal yoga class, Linda took Daniel's old laptop out of storage. She powered it up, cleaned the dust from the screen with a dry paper towel, and opened a spreadsheet. One column after another, she entered assets. Appliances, heirlooms, furniture, jewelry, even the baby grand piano in the corner no one ever touched. Every entry mattered. Not because of the dollar value, but because no one else was counting. After lunch, she drove to the nearest Walmart and bought a $29 Ring camera disguised as a clock. She mounted it on her dresser, aimed toward the door and closet. One screw, one app setup, and it was done. By dusk, Linda was folding laundry when the doorbell rang. It was Mrs. Gray from 2 doors down, holding an envelope. "Here's the rent check, sweetheart," she said with a warm smile. "Kaylee said it's best if we pay you directly now that the suite's booked so often. You've done such a nice job with it." Linda froze. "I'm sorry, what?" "Oh, you didn't know?" Mrs. Gray blinked, uncomfortable now. "I thought, well, we've been using the guest suite through Airbnb for the past month. Said it was part of their parenting fund." Linda took the envelope without a word. Inside was a check for $640. Her name was on it. Not Kaylee's, not Daniel's. Herrin back inside, she walked straight to her room, shut the door, and logged into her personal bank account. An account Daniel didn't know still existed. She endorsed the check, mobile deposit, confirmed. Then she closed the app, slow and steady, like someone laying the first brick in a wall. The deposit cleared. Linda smiled, just slightly. The money was hers, legally and quietly, and no one else even knew it was missing. The morning after the Airbnb check cleared, Linda sat at the kitchen table in her housecoat, cradling a chipped teacup. Steam curled from her chamomile like a breath she didn't have to explain. Kaylee sauntered in wearing a workout set that still had the tag on, humming to herself as she opened the fridge. "I've been looking into retirement homes," Linda said softly, not looking up from the tea. Her voice was calm, barely there, like it might disappear if the moment got too loud. Kaylee turned, eyes widening just enough to betray surprise. "Oh?" I thought. "I mean, you've been doing fine here." "I don't want to be in the way once the baby arrives," Linda murmured. "Places fill up fast. Figured I should get ahead of it." By that afternoon, Kaylee was a changed woman. She offered Linda chamomile of her own, brought her an herbal neck wrap from the spa, and even typed out a transition plan with bullet points on packing, storage, and notifying Social Security. She printed it on blush stationery. "You've earned peace," Kaylee cooed. "Let me help however I can." Linda smiled. Not sweetly, strategically. But the next morning, while Linda was supposedly napping, she caught the faint creak of floorboards in her bedroom. She stayed silent in the hallway, watching through the cracked door as Kaylee rifled through her jewelry box, fingers ghosting over clasps and labels. She didn't take anything. Yet. Just counted silently, like a child measuring candy. Linda made a mental note and walked away barefoot, so Kaylee never heard. That weekend, she rented a storage unit under her maiden name. She made 3 trips, each time loading boxes of paperwork, valuables, and anything she didn't want to see in a pawnshop photo. At the final drop-off, she snapped the padlock shut and stood in the fluorescent-lit hallway, breathing in the sterile scent of insulation and dust. On Sunday evening, she signed up for online banking. Every pension check, retirement deposit, and dividend rerouted into separate accounts. No more paper statements, no more visibility. That night at dinner, Daniel pulled into the driveway in a cherry red truck with custom rims. "Surprise," he grinned, sliding out of the cab. "Needed something baby-safe." Linda stared at the truck as he opened the back door to reveal a new car seat, still wrapped in plastic. "For the baby," he repeated. She said. "Whose name is the financing under?" Daniel blinked. "I mean, it's a joint deal." "Doesn't matter, Mom." It mattered. Back inside, Linda sat with her planner under the reading lamp, scribbling a new name at the top of the page. Reed Allen, the estate attorney she'd used when setting up her late husband's affairs. The next day she called him. "I just need to confirm something," she said. "You still own the house outright, Ms. Mayhew," Reed replied, not even pausing. "Title was never amended. You co-signed their prenup, remember?" Linda did remember. She'd insisted on it. "Just in case," she'd said once, back when she still believed that insurance was for strangers. Reed paused. "Is everything okay at home?" Linda looked out the window as Daniel climbed into the truck again, revving it loud enough to wake the neighbor's dog. Kaylee walked out with a decaf latte in each hand and didn't bother to close the gate. "I'm thinking about a change," she said finally, "something quieter." She leaned back, fingers curling around the pen, and exhaled. Slow. "Reed," she asked, voice even and measured, "can I legally evict someone, even if they're my son?" The copier at Midwest State Bank groaned like it was choking on memory. Linda stood patiently as it spat out the final duplicate, the original floor plan of her home, drawn in fine ink and yellowed at the edges. Her name, Linda J. Mayhew, was neatly printed in the signature box next to her late husband's, both penned before Daniel ever learned to spell his own. The branch manager, a kind man with a limp and a hearing aid, handed her a thick folder. "We still had your old safety box number on record. Not many folks keep blueprints anymore." "They don't build things to last anymore either," she said, sliding the folder into her canvas bag. Her voice held the weight of cement curing. Back home, she cleared the dining room table. Among birth certificates and social security cards was the forgotten prenup she'd insisted Daniel and Kaylee sign before the wedding. Page 3, bottom half. "The property located at 1186 Lemon Tree Circle shall remain the separate, sole legal possession of Linda J. Mayhew." Her signature, their signatures, notarized, sealed. So why had Kaylee spoken so confidently, so publicly, like she already owned it? The next day, Linda overheard Kaylee talking to a neighbor through the back fence. "She gets confused sometimes," Kaylee said. "I don't know how much longer she'll even remember what room is hers." Linda's hands trembled, not with doubt, but with restraint. Her memory was fine. Her silence, however, was thinning. The following morning, she drove herself to the clinic. "I want a cognitive evaluation," she told the nurse. "Full workup, no shortcuts. 2 hours of tests, drawings, puzzles, questions." When the doctor sat down across from her with a clipboard, he smiled. "Mrs. Mayhew, you're sharper than most of the 30-year-olds I see." "I know," she said. "I just needed the paper." Back at home, she slipped the medical report into a red folder marked Legal Prep. Then she opened her laptop and began drafting a document with the quiet precision of a nurse reloading a syringe. Notice of intent to evict, date, blank, signature, blank. But the rest, solid, enforceable, clear. She printed 3 copies. That evening she sipped red wine in the den, while Reed Allen's voice echoed through the phone speaker. "You can file now," he said, "but I recommend waiting until after the birth. Courts might frown on evicting a heavily pregnant woman." Linda traced the lip of her glass with her pinky. "They didn't wait to humiliate me. Why should I wait to reclaim what's mine?" A long pause on Reed's end. Then a sigh. "We'll prepare everything either way. Quietly." The next day, she sat in the sunroom watching Kaylee direct an Amazon delivery man like she was queen of a rented castle. Daniel, glued to his phone, didn't even look up as Linda walked past. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. The walls remembered who built them. 2 mornings later, the mailbox creaked. Linda opened it expecting junk mail and grocery ads. Instead, a letter with Daniel's name in bold font caught her eye. The return address, Sycamore Credit Union. The envelope felt dense, the kind of heavy that comes with legal ink. She placed it on the kitchen table and stared at it like it might explode. Her hands itched to open it, but she didn't. Instead, she slid it under Daniel's bedroom door without a word. A minute later, "Mom!" Footsteps thundered. "Why are you opening my mail?" She met him in the hall. "I didn't," she said. "But if it's about the house, I might be able to explain it better than you can." The crinkle of plastic was the first thing she heard, that distinctive, disrespectful rustle that said, "This doesn't matter anymore." Linda stared at the lump shoved in the back corner of the newly painted nursery closet, the same closet where she'd once stored her late husband's first editions and war medals. Now, pale yellow walls smelled like fresh latex and entitlement, and her wedding dress, the one she had worn the day she became a Mayhew, was balled up like trash. She reached in slowly. The fabric was still soft beneath the thin layer of dust, the lace at the sleeve frayed but intact. Her hands trembled as she pulled it from the bag, revealing more than just tulle, an old jewelry box, a cedar keepsake of baby shoes, and her mother's rosary, each one carelessly displaced. Kaylee hadn't just packed her away, she'd tried to erase her. The room, once a warm-toned library filled with floor-to-ceiling shelves and the scent of mahogany and pipe smoke, was now a Pinterest pastel haven with a neon baby on board sign over the crib. Linda's husband's recliner was gone, replaced by a rocking chair Kaylee had proudly announced came from an eco-boutique in Chicago. She didn't speak. Instead, Linda backed out of the room and pulled out her phone. A slow, deliberate walkthrough of the entire house followed. She filmed the pant, the closet where her linens used to be, now housing Kaylee's maternity snack stash, and even the garage, where her gardening tools had vanished without explanation. "This is for my records," she said softly to the camera, "before eviction." At Reed's office the next day, she sat across from the polished cherrywood desk, her back straight, her hands steady. "Let's finish it," she said. "All of it." He slid a stack of documents toward her, printed on thick, cream-colored stock. "Transferring full title into a protected living trust will guarantee no unauthorized claim. It also lets you appoint successor trustees without needing family involvement." "Perfect," Linda said, signing with quiet finality. "And this clause," he continued, pointing with a pen, "makes it clear, if any cohabitants act with hostility, verbal or physical, they forfeit residence. No court wiggle room." Linda nodded. "Call it the civility clause." That evening, she reviewed the language again. Every paragraph felt like a brick sliding back into place after years of erosion. Then came the final piece. Reed's draft of the eviction notice. It was crisp, clean, undeniably legal. She folded the single-page document in thirds and slid it into a cream envelope. On the front, she wrote only one word in looping cursive: "Congratulations." By the next morning, the house was bustling again. Kaylee's voice carried through the walls like static. "We're doing a second shower. Girls only this time. No drama." Linda heard her laugh with a sugary twang that hadn't existed a month ago. She spent the day downstairs, invisible, preparing tea in her quiet kitchen while balloons were taped to the porch she built herself with her husband 30 years earlier. Then she did one final thing: wrapped the baby gift. The soft blanket inside was store-bought, nothing handmade. The envelope rested beneath it like a foundation stone. Linda folded tissue paper over the contents, tied a white satin ribbon, and attached a small silver tag. "To Kaylee. For the future." When Kaylee opened it hours later in the living room, surrounded by giggling friends and champagne flutes filled with mocktails, she reached in and pulled the blanket out, laughing. Ah, finally something she didn't crochet. Then she felt the envelope underneath, pulled it out slowly, opened it. Silence spread like spilled water. Her eyes moved across the page, lips tightening. "What is this?" Linda, watching from the kitchen threshold, met Kaylee's gaze calmly. "You'll want to read the fine print on that one, dear." It was the silence in the room that made her pause. Not the sweet kind, no lullabies or wind chimes from a mobile, but the kind that falls after a storm. The walls, once dark oak bookshelves and framed memories, now radiated a pale peach sheen. A Pinterest-perfect nursery. She stepped inside, and the scent hit her. Fresh paint over old wood, masking everything it had once been. She crouched and opened the closet. There it was, crumpled like last season's wrapping paper. Her wedding dress. The bodice, once hand-beaded by her mother, was flattened. The skirt, creased and dulled, all of it shoved into a black hefty bag beneath Kaylee's bins labeled "Baby Girl's Firsts." Linda lifted it out slowly, the crackle of plastic unforgiving, her hands trembling around fabric that had known love, promises, and decades of loyalty. Her wedding dress wasn't the only casualty. As she opened the attic door later that day, the scent of mothballs and damp insulation rushed out like an accusation. There, stacked haphazardly beneath Kaylee's seasonal decor, were boxes Linda had labeled in her late husband's handwriting: China, do not touch, mother's jewelry, photo albums, 1970s. She reached for the top one and peeled back the lid. Broken porcelain clinked like teeth in a jar. Linda didn't cry. She walked back down the stairs, shut the door gently, and went to her room. She took out her phone and began a slow, methodical video tour. This is the guest suite Kaylee now calls the nursery. This closet held my husband's medals and books. It's now for plush toys. My dress was found in a trash bag. She moved to the hallway, filming frames taken down, walls scrubbed clean of the past. She kept her tone even, her voice steady. "This is for documentation," she whispered. "Before eviction." The next morning, Linda walked into Reed Allen's office with a purpose. "I'm ready," she said. He offered her a calm, measured smile and passed over a packet with a simple gold foil heading, Protected Living Trust, Linda Mayhew. Every page felt like a reclamation of her name, her autonomy, her home. "This clause," Reed said, tapping the third page, "makes any act of verbal or emotional aggression from a cohabitant grounds for immediate voiding of their right to remain. It's ironclad. A civility clause, as you wanted." Linda signed it with a pen that once belonged to her husband, his initials still carved into the barrel. "Then let's serve." "It's soft," she said. Reed raised an eyebrow. "Soft? With a bow," she replied. That evening, as Kaylee giggled with her sisters while arranging gift bags for her second baby shower, Linda wrapped one of her own. A glossy pink bag, floral tissue paper, and a blank greeting card. Inside was a soft, store-bought fleece blanket. Nothing hand-knit, nothing personal. Beneath it, in a smooth white envelope, sat the legal eviction notice. Clean, precise, filed that morning with the county clerk and the sheriff's office. She placed the bag carefully on the living room gift table beside the diaper cakes and pastel boxes marked from Amazon. Then she walked upstairs, boiled a pot of Earl Grey, and waited. She didn't attend the shower. She didn't need to. Downstairs, the oohs and ahs echoed beneath the clink of mocktail glasses. Someone played soft jazz from a Bluetooth speaker. Laughter rose, then dipped. Then, silence. Kaylee's voice, high and sudden. "What is this?" Chairs scraped. Murmurs began. Linda sipped her tea, smiled slightly, and leaned back in the armchair her husband once sat in every evening after work. She said it without raising her voice, but her words landed with the weight of stone. The foyer lights buzzed softly overhead, casting pale halos on the hardwood floors. Daniel stood just beyond the threshold of her study, fists clenched, breath ragged, face flushed with the kind of indignation only the guilty ever fully wore. "You're being cold, vindictive," he said. Linda didn't flinch. "I'm being precise." Daniel's eyes scanned the room, maybe searching for a shred of the woman who once stayed up all night, making his Halloween costumes from scratch. But the quilted warmth he remembered had been folded away and locked up, right alongside her patience. "I get it, okay? You're hurt," he muttered. "But you could have talked to me?" Linda pressed a button on her phone, and Kaylee's voice hissed into the air like venom. Linda's husband was useless. No wonder she clings to that old chair like it's him. It probably smells like death. The silence that followed was loud. Daniel's mouth parted slightly. "Where did you live in my house," Linda said, eyes fixed on him. "My walls, my vents, my wiring. You thought I wouldn't hear? Or did you just not care?" He shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the recorder in her hand. She didn't mean... She meant every word, Linda said. And you let her. He opened his mouth again, then closed it. A beat passed. Then another. Finally, he asked, "So what now? You're really evicting your pregnant daughter-in-law?" She didn't blink. "Number, I'm evicting my tenants. If you'd like to challenge it, hire a lawyer. But it'll be public. And Kaylee's followers? They might be interested in what she says when she thinks no one's recording." Daniel's jaw tensed. Later that afternoon, Linda sat at her kitchen table replying to emails on her tablet. One was from her neighbor Karen. "Just saw Kaylee's meltdown. You've been more than patient. We're on your side." Another read, "If you need a witness, we've heard them yelling through the windows. You've always been respectful. They haven't." Across town, Kaylee took to Instagram. Her stories were cryptic, pale pink backgrounds, moody piano music, and captions like, "Some people just can't let go of control." One post read, "Toxic family doesn't get access just because they're blood." Linda recognized the aesthetic. It was the language of self-victimization wrapped in pastel filters. Still, the algorithm didn't favor her this time. Within hours, comments dried up. Kaylee's baby registry lost followers. A few petty influencers even reposted her stories with their own reactions. Imagine calling your MIL toxic while living in her house. Linda allowed herself one smirk before turning to the practicalities. She pulled open her notebook, flipped to the section marked contingency plans, and began calling local realtors about renting out the guest rooms short-term. If Daniel and Kaylee dragged this out, at least she'd have vetted tenants lined up. She snapped a few photos of the now vacant upstairs suite, her old master bedroom, and saved the listing as a draft. By dinner, Daniel returned. His voice was quieter this time. "We just need a little more time." Linda stirred her soup slowly. 7 days, no more. "You'd really do that? Put us on the street with a baby coming?" Linda looked up. "You already put me in the attic." He didn't reply, just turned and left, shoulders sagging under the weight of too late regrets. That night, a knock sounded at Linda's door. An officer stood on the porch, hat in hand. "Ma'am," he said, "a temporary restraining order's been filed. We'll need you to come with us for questioning." Kaylee had struck first, again. This time, legally. The knock came just after 9, hard and deliberate. Linda had just pulled her cardigan tighter around her shoulders and sunk into the living room recliner, with a cup of chamomile tea when she heard it, 3 firm raps against the front door. She rose slowly, heart pacing faster than her slippers across the hardwood. Through the peephole stood 2 officers in uniform, hands clasped in front of their utility belts, faces unreadable. "Evening, ma'am," the taller one said. "We're responding to a report filed earlier today regarding a potential domestic disturbance." Linda opened the door without flinching. "Let me guess. Kaylee?" The shorter officer's expression twitched. "We're not here to make assumptions, just to ensure everyone's safety. May we come in?" Linda gestured toward the foyer. "Certainly, but you'll want to see some paperwork before we begin." She led them to the dining table, where a meticulously labeled binder sat waiting beneath the soft glow of the chandelier. Linda unfastened the flap and pulled out a crisp stack of documents. First, the certified copy of the living trust, then the notarized ownership deed, and finally, a flash drive containing video logs, time-stamped and cataloged. She clicked it into her laptop and cued the most relevant clip. The video flickered to life, showing Linda standing in her bedroom, voice clear but weary. "This is Sunday," she said on screen, "the day after Kaylee screamed that I was a parasite squatting in my own home. I'm recording this because I no longer feel safe." The officers exchanged a look. The taller one spoke up again, quieter this time. "We weren't told about any of this." "Of course not," Linda said, folding her hands calmly. "Because that would make me seem credible." They reviewed the papers in silence. The trust was airtight, the deed unmistakable. When the video ended, the shorter officer closed the binder slowly. "Ma'am, we apologize for the intrusion. We'll be making note of this incident for record keeping, but you're well within your rights. Thank you for your time." As they left, Linda watched from behind the curtain, face composed, heart hammering. Outside, she saw Kaylee watching from the upstairs window. When their eyes met, Linda didn't blink. Kaylee turned away first. By morning, Reed had already drafted and filed the counter-motion. False claims of mental instability, especially ones so easily disproven, had a way of boomeranging in court. His email was crisp and to the point. "They're cornered. Don't blink." Later that day, a letter appeared in the mailbox. No return address, but the handwriting was nervous and rushed. Linda unfolded it at the kitchen table. "Aunt Linda, I was there. I saw what really happened. I'm sorry for not stepping in sooner. Kaylee's out of control. Emily." It wasn't much, but it was enough to remind her that not every silence was betrayal. Some were fear, some were survival. That night, Linda added a new ritual. After locking the front door, she slid an old metal latch across the inside of her bedroom door. The squeal of it scraping into place became a lullaby of control. She tucked the binder of legal documents and her will into a fireproof envelope, sealed it, and slid it beneath the cedar chest at the foot of her bed. She also updated her emergency contact list, scrubbing Daniel's name from the hospital forms and replacing it with Reed's office line. The walls of her house were still hers, but now they listened. The next evening, Daniel stood in the threshold of her kitchen, face weary, shoulders low. "Would you really leave us homeless?" Linda looked at him, eyes clear as glass. "You already left me houseless." The hallway was narrow, too narrow for the tension it now held. Linda had just stepped out of the laundry room, arms full of neatly folded towels, when Kaylee stormed around the corner. Her perfume arrived first, too sweet, too sharp, followed by her swollen belly and a look that could curdle milk. "Move!" Kaylee snapped. Linda didn't flinch. She stepped aside, polite and measured, but not quick enough. Kaylee's shoulder clipped hers with intention. A shove, barely a jolt, but deliberate, calculated, and caught in perfect clarity on the baby blue phone held at waist level by 15-year-old Alyssa, from next door. She'd been standing in the archway, taking video for her aunt who couldn't make the baby shower. The clip lasted 7 seconds. But 7 seconds can end empires. By sunset, the video had 6,000 views on Facebook and a caption that read, "Mill lives in the guest room of her own house. This is how she's treated." It spread like ivy. Comments flooded in, venomous and sympathetic in equal measure. "She owns the house and they're pushing her around? I hope she evicts them. How do you disrespect your kid's grandma like this?" Daniel found out first. His face pale, his voice cracking as he confronted Linda in the kitchen. "Mom, you need to tell them to take it down." She was slicing strawberries for a salad. Her knife didn't pause. "Why?" "It's ruining Kaylee's brand. Her inbox is flooded. Sponsors are pulling. Deals." She's crying. Linda dropped the slices into a bowl one by one, slow and steady. "So was I. The day she threw out my wedding dress." Daniel leaned against the counter, looking small for the first time since boyhood. "This could destroy us." Linda looked up, her voice soft but blade sharp. "Then it's doing its job." By the next morning, Kaylee's baby brand sponsor, Bloombox Organics, had issued a statement. "We've ended all affiliations with Kaylee Fields pending further internal review." It wasn't just corporate distancing. The online mom groups turned fast. Screenshots from Kaylee's private stories, her rants about boomer baggage and getting rid of the dead weight, surfaced and circulated. One of them featured Linda's garden with the caption, "Ugh, her flowers smell like old lady regret." Linda never commented, never liked, never shared, but she watched and waited. Then came the podcast invite. The subject line read, "A voice for the silenced. Interview request. The quiet power of mothers." Linda sat in her reading room, formerly the nursery Kaylee had painted over, and spoke for 34 minutes. She didn't name names. She didn't raise her voice. She told her story like stitching a quilt, line by line, no skipped corners. "I was made to feel like a relic in the home I built," she said, voice calm, lips steady. "So I reminded them who laid the foundation. Listeners flooded the comments. People from across the state and then the country shared stories of elderly parents pushed aside, mistreated, erased. One morning, a bouquet of white lilies appeared on Linda's porch. No card. But the vase was familiar. Cut glass from her wedding registry in 1981. She'd last seen it in the guest room closet, which Kaylee had decluttered last month. She left it outside untouched, letting the sun do what it would. Reed called the next day. Kaylee's filed to contest the trust. Linda was quiet a beat. Then, of course she did. Reed paused. We're ready. Let her bring her best. She's walking into a buzzsaw. Linda made tea. Outside, Daniel cried in the driveway. The sobs weren't loud, just jagged gasps, like a boy who'd finally realized he wasn't welcome home. The blinds in the kitchen window were half closed. Linda stirred honey into her mug and watched him from behind the slats. He stood near the hydrangeas she planted last fall, shoulders hunched, hands open like prayer. The cold hadn't bitten yet, but the clouds were the kind that held thunder behind them. When the knock came, she was already at the door. Mom, Daniel said, voice cracked and small. Please, just until the baby comes. Her tea was still steaming in her hand. 10 days, she said. That's it. No arguments, no shouting. You stay out of my room, my office, and my storage. And Kaylee doesn't speak to me at all. Daniel nodded too quickly. She won't be a problem. She's just stressed. Linda held his gaze. I bet. He reached out to hug her. She didn't move. He dropped his arms. Inside, Kaylee avoided eye contact as they carried their bags back in. Her belly led the way, but her eyes were cold. She didn't say a word. Linda didn't offer any. On the third night, Linda heard her crying behind the closed bedroom door. Not loud, not desperate, just sharp sniffles and the squeak of the old floor vent when she paced. Still, Linda didn't knock. Compassion and boundaries could live in the same house. For now. The days passed slowly, measured in silence and side eyes. Linda moved through her routines like breath. She washed her sheets. She arranged her pantry. She took a photo of every room, every drawer, every shelf. On her phone, they filed neatly into a folder named Before They Go. She stayed out of their way but kept the camera rolling on her Ring app. It was mounted now outside her bedroom door. On day 5, she started assembling a memory book. Not of them, never of them, but of the house. Black and white photos of her husband sanding the stairs, a photo of the swing Daniel fell from at age 9, grinning through a chipped tooth. She left blank spaces where photos of Kaylee might have gone, pages as quiet as her anger. The locksmith arrived on a Tuesday. He was young, polite, wore thick gloves and a Notre Dame hoodie. He examined the back door's latch and the basement lock. Someone's tried to pop these, he said. Looks like with a flathead. I'll replace them. Linda nodded. Please make sure they don't match the old keys. That night she sat in her husband's recliner. The leather had cracked and the arms sagged, but it still carried his scent faintly, like aftershave and oak wood. She placed her palm on the armrest, closed her eyes and whispered, I'm almost done, sweetheart. One more storm, then sun. Thunder rumbled outside. Not loud, but promising. On day 10, she made cornbread. She didn't offer any. Kaylee spent the day scrolling furiously on her phone, her jaw tight, stomach low. Daniel wandered the yard like a man on house A. Arrest. The wind pushed at the window frames. Then Linda's phone rang. She stepped into the hallway, answered on speaker. Linda. Reed's voice was crisp. They missed the deadline. Eviction can be enforced now. You ready? Her eyes drifted to the living room. Daniel on the couch. Kaylee curled around her phone, the baby bump like a shield between her and the world. The yard looked like a magazine spread. Pastel balloons arched over the entryway. Welcome Baby Fields, stitched onto a wooden sign Kaylee probably paid someone else to burn by hand. A white tent shaded long folding tables lined with catered food, faux eucalyptus garlands, and gold plastic cutlery pretending to be formal. Linda hadn't been invited this time either. But that didn't matter. The house was still hers. She stepped out of the Uber, a woven gift bag dangling from one arm, the other resting lightly on the elbow of Reed Allen, whose charcoal suit made him look more pastor than attorney. Behind them, 2 sheriff's deputies followed silently, one with a clipboard tucked under his arm, the other already eyeing the property layout with professional disinterest. Inside the tent, laughter popped like champagne bubbles. Kaylee, wearing a dusty pink maternity gown and a flower crown, sat on the wicker peacock chair that once belonged in Linda's sunroom. Linda could smell lavender sachets and sugared cake as she walked up the brick path. Reed held the door open. Linda crossed the threshold. Conversation didn't so much die as it dropped, flat and sudden, like a broken violin string. Kaylee's jaw stiffened around a smile. "What are you doing here?" Linda reached into her bag and pulled out a thick, sealed envelope. "Delivering a gift, just like you asked." Reed handed the papers to the deputy, who cleared his throat and stepped forward. "Ma'am," he said, addressing Kaylee, "we're serving a legal eviction notice under Indiana Code 3231. You were previously notified. The 10-day grace period has expired." Gasps, murmurs, forks clattering onto paper plates. Daniel stood by the buffet table, clutching a plate of sliders, his face frozen mid-chew. "You can't be serious!" Kaylee shrieked, rising too fast. The flower crown slipped sideways on her head. "This is harassment! You came to my baby shower with police?" "This is my home," Linda said evenly, "and you had your second chance." "Daniel!" Kaylee shouted. "Do something!" He looked between the sheriff and Reed, then to his mother. "Mom, please, let's talk privately." "No," she replied. "You forfeited privacy when you made me a tenant in my own house." A chair scraped loudly. One of Kaylee's friends grabbed her purse and left without a word. Another began quietly packing up gift bags. The entire event was unraveling like a loose hem. Kaylee's voice cracked as she lunged toward Linda. "You want to humiliate me while I'm pregnant in front of everyone?" Linda didn't flinch. "You humiliated me in this same room, remember?" Kaylee turned to the officers, breath heaving. "Get her out." The deputy calmly shook his head. "She owns the home. You're being lawfully evicted. Please begin making arrangements to leave. We'll be back in 48 hours to verify." The silence after that was different. Heavier. Linda moved to the sofa, plucked her crochet blanket from the armrest where Kaylee had tossed it aside earlier, and folded it gently against her chest. It still smelled faintly of cedar and mint from the sachets in her armoire. Outside, someone's phone dinged. A neighbor across the street had started filming. 5 minutes later, the video hit the Carmel Community Watch Facebook group under the caption, "The house always wins." Kaylee collapsed into the wicker chair, face buried in her hands. Linda stood tall, unmoving, unapologetic. "You'll die alone!" Kaylee screamed from behind her palms. Linda turned toward the door, looked back once and whispered, "Not before you leave." The rain came soft and unexpected that morning, misty, cold, clinging to everything. Linda sat in the bay window with a mug of chamomile, watching movers back a U-Haul into the driveway like it wasn't already soaked with months of venom and entitlement. One of the men adjusted his ball cap, glanced toward the front door, then back at the clipboard. They had no idea whose history they were lifting into boxes. Inside, Kaylee waddled from room to room, issuing instructions with clipped breaths and one hand pressed hard against her back. Her belly was taut, nearly bursting against her cardigan. Daniel hovered behind her like a confused usher, trying to keep things moving while pretending the tremor in his voice was just stress, not fear. Then it happened. From the hallway came the sudden clatter of something falling, an unopened box maybe, but Kaylee screamed, short, sharp. Water hit the hardwood floor in a thick splash, darker than the rain outside. "Mom!" Daniel's voice cracked as he darted toward the kitchen, where Linda stood. "Please, call 911. She's in labor." Linda blinked slowly, calm, still holding her tea. She pulled her phone from her sweater pocket, placed it in Daniel's palm, and said flatly, "You know how." The look in his eyes flickered, shame, confusion, rage, regret. But he took the phone. By the time the ambulance arrived, Kaylee was hunched in a kitchen chair, wheezing through contractions, surrounded by open boxes and a half-packed nursery mobile tangled in bubble wrap. The paramedics moved quickly. Daniel followed them out, one hand on Kaylee's shoulder, the other still holding Linda's phone. Linda didn't follow. She stood at the top of the porch steps and watched the ambulance roll away. The tailpipe rattled. Her son never looked back. Hours later, Linda stepped into the hospital lobby, alone, unnoticed, and perfectly unbothered. She carried a small parcel wrapped in brown paper, tied with white yarn. At the reception desk, she asked for a nurse. When the woman in blue scrubs approached, Linda smiled. "Would you please make sure this reaches room 204? Her voice was warm, but firm. The nurse took it without hesitation. "Sure thing, ma'am." Inside the box, the same crochet blanket, folded neatly, soft and powder blue, with tiny pearl buttons lining one edge. Nestled inside its folds, a single sheet of paper. The eviction notice, dated, notarized, final. Linda hadn't needed to include it, but she wanted it known. It wasn't forgotten. Kaylee's mother arrived an hour later, red-faced and tight-lipped, her voice loud enough to echo into the hallway outside the maternity ward. Linda passed her in silence. "That woman," Kaylee's mother spat under her breath, "threw them out while she's pregnant. Disgusting." Linda stopped, slowly turned. "No," she said. "They threw me out while I was still living." She walked away before a reply could fumble its way out of the woman's mouth. Later that night, Linda sat at her kitchen table. Alone. No baby cries. No passive-aggressive footsteps in the hall. Just the ticking clock and the scent of lemon oil from freshly wiped countertops. She opened her address book and drew a neat line through Daniel, emergency contact. Then flipped the page, added a new name, Meredith Hill, primary contact in case of emergency. Her old friend from the local library, the one who'd dropped off soup and quiet encouragement when Linda's husband died, the one who never asked for anything back. Her phone buzzed. A message from Reed. "Contest to trust dismissed. Final judgment ruled in your favor. No further challenges permitted." Linda didn't smile. She just breathed, like she'd come up from under something heavy and sour that had sat on her chest for months. Her phone rang again. Unknown number. A young voice on the other end said, "Hi, this is Channel 6 News. We'd love to feature your story. The grandma who took the house back, how'd you do it?" The television was off. No arguing from the next room, no shoes tossed carelessly at the door, no perfume trails staining the air. Linda padded barefoot across the living room, soaking in the stillness. The walls no longer echoed with entitlement. Just her breath, just her pace. The nursery was first. She stood in the doorway and stared, her hand resting lightly on the frame. The pale yellow paint Kaylee had insisted on now looked ghostly under the soft daylight. Linda opened the closet slowly, revealing a row of empty hangers and a faint scent of talcum powder that hadn't come from her. She exhaled once, then rolled up her sleeves. By the weekend, the crib was gone. The baby decals peeled from the walls. In their place, 2 deep walnut bookshelves, her reading chair, reupholstered in navy, and her late husband's lamp, repaired with a new socket. She laid down a Persian rug that had lived in the attic for years and turned on a small vintage radio. Sinatra filled the room. She didn't need a nursery. She needed herself. On Mondays, she volunteered at the shelter just across the highway. Not to talk about what happened, not at first. She served meals, folded linens, organized donated socks into pairs. But as weeks passed, her story slipped out. In pieces. By the 3rd visit, 2 women sat next to her with tears in their eyes, nodding. By the 5th, one whispered, "My daughter did the same. Pushed me out once her boyfriend moved in." Word spread. Her podcast interview aired a week after that. Just 30 minutes of audio, her story, unfiltered. No vengeance in her voice, no rage, just the recounting of being erased inside her own home and what it took to take herself back. The producer called it radical grace. Linda called it survival. Emails flooded her inbox. "I thought it was just me. You gave me courage. I started packing today." She read each one in silence, sometimes placing her hand to her heart, steadying it. Sometimes she wept. One Tuesday morning, she sat at her kitchen table and opened her will. Her pen hovered for a moment. Then she drew a thick black line through Daniel's name. In its place, she wrote, Wellspring Women's Foundation. She pictured the faces of the women she now shared lunch breaks with, faces worn but alive. The house, her house, would be someone else's haven one day. That same afternoon the phone rang. A realtor. Professional voice? Too cheerful. Hi, Mrs. Mayhew. A man named Daniel tried to list your property today. Said he was the co-owner? Linda didn't answer immediately. She opened the spice cabinet, retrieved a tin of mint tea, then replied, Tell him the house says no. She didn't mention the attempt to read. She didn't need to. Her trust was bulletproof. The next day, an envelope arrived. Familiar handwriting, slanted, messy, masculine. She knew the loops of the L in Mom. Daniel. It was light. Just a single sheet, maybe. She didn't open it. Instead, she walked it straight to the cabinet beneath the hallway lamp, where she stored things that didn't serve her anymore. Dead batteries, expired coupons. That envelope joined the pile. That night she scrolled social media. Out of curiosity, not longing, Kaylee had posted a selfie. Pale, tired, no baby in the shot. The caption read, She took everything. Linda stared at it for a moment, then whispered to the screen, No, sweetheart, I took back what was mine. She lit a lavender candle by the window, opened her leather-bound journal, and wrote in thick, confident strokes. Chapter 1. After Them. Linda sat in the same armchair where her son had once yanked her arm, the afternoon sun streaking through the lace curtains, softening the memory but never erasing it. The crocheted baby blanket, the very one she had held that day, was now folded neatly on the side table. No longer a symbol of peace offered, now a line drawn. The house was quiet, but lived in, not haunted anymore. Footsteps echoed lightly from the guest room upstairs, the soft shuffle of new residents finding their rhythm. 2 young women from the shelter, one barely 20, the other with a toddler who never stopped humming. They called her Ms. Linda, said it like it meant something, like it carried weight, and to them, maybe it did. One evening, as they folded laundry together on the back porch, the older one, Bree, picked up a skein of yarn from a basket near Linda's rocking chair. Is this how you start? She asked, holding the hook like it might break. Linda smiled, settled beside her and took her hands gently. That's how you start anything, she said. You just loop once, then again, then again. Her voice caught, not with sorrow but awe. She realized she wasn't just teaching stitches, she was weaving something back together. The next day she found a small package on her porch. No knock, no note. Just the wind shifting slightly as she opened the door. Inside, a picture frame. Worn wood. Cheap glass. A photo from years ago, her and Daniel, his hand clutching hers at the state fair, cotton candy on both their cheeks. She touched the image but didn't cry. She set the frame on her bookshelf. Not in the center. Off to the side. Not forgotten, just no longer front and center. Later that week, she stared at her phone for a long time, thumb hovering over his contact. Daniel, sell. The last message he had sent was months ago. You win. No follow-up, no fight. Just those 2 words, brittle and bruised. She didn't call. Not yet. Instead, she brewed lemon balm tea and set folding chairs in the garden, stringing white lights along the fence. Her neighbors arrived slowly, bearing casseroles and potted plants. Even Pastor Cheryl, who had officiated her husband's memorial, came wearing a wide-brimmed hat and a crooked grin. They gathered under the oak tree, clinking glasses of sweet tea and lemonade. Laughter danced through the hedges, real and ripe. Linda stood to speak, holding a small toast card but not needing it. She looked at the worn bricks beneath her feet. She and her husband had laid them by hand, one by one, 25 years ago. You told me I was stronger than I thought, she said, raising her glass to the sky. You were right. A hush fell over the group, not somber, just full. Full of memory, of time, of the kind of grief that doesn't ache anymore. It hums. The sun dipped low, plates were cleared, dishes rinsed, guests departed with hugs that lingered a second too long. Linda was halfway to blowing out the candles when it happened. The doorbell rang. She wiped her hands on her apron, walked to the door, and opened it. Daniel stood there. In his arms. The baby. Daniel stood on the porch, the baby wrapped in a sunflower yellow swaddle that didn't look warm enough for spring wind. His eyes flicked from her face to the welcome mat and back again. The same mat he used to jump on as a boy, pretending it was lava. "Can I come in?" he asked, voice lower than she remembered, like gravel that had been rained on. Lind didn't answer at first. She looked at the baby, round cheeks, button nose, peacefully asleep, then back at her son. She stepped aside. No hug, no fanfare, just a quiet gesture and the door swinging wide. They moved into the living room like strangers in a museum. Daniel sat on the edge of the couch, careful not to disturb the child. Linda took her armchair, her chair, and settled in without a word. The blanket draped over the back still smelled faintly of lavender. Outside, a wind chime murmured against the breeze. The silence wasn't cruel. It was earned. "I can't undo what I let happen," Daniel said finally. Linda let that hang. The clock ticked once. Twice. "I know," she said. Her voice was steady. "But you can leave something better for her." Daniel's eyes dropped to the baby, then rose slowly to meet hers. "She deserves better." Linda didn't nod, didn't soothe. She wasn't here to pat his guilt or feed it cookies. She had been dragged through shame, silence, and slander in her own home. And now she sat in that same home, returned, restored, unbothered. She didn't ask to hold the baby. She didn't even lean forward. "You'll want this," she said, reaching for a small envelope tucked into her side table drawer. He took it, hesitated. Inside, a notarized copy of her trust document. His name, still missing. Daniel read the top lines, fingers tightening around the edges. "I understand," he said. A pause. "Too late, but I do." Linda exhaled, a slow, deliberate breath, as if letting out every unspoken word she'd ever swallowed. The baby stirred. Neither of them moved. "I used to think," Daniel started, then stopped. He looked around the room, the bookshelf filled with family albums, the coffee mug that still read "World's Best Mom" in chipped paint. "I used to think you'd always forgive me." "I did," she said. "Too many times." His mouth parted slightly, then closed again. "Kaylee and I," he began, but she held up a hand. Not cruelly, just enough to say, "That's not why you're here." He understood. This wasn't about Kaylee anymore. It never really had been. Linda stood, walked to the window, pulled the curtain back just enough to let golden light fill the room. It kissed the hardwood, the old piano, the top of the baby's head. "You ever think the house remembers?" she asked softly. Daniel looked around. "I do," he said. She turned back to him. "Then remember this. The next time someone tells you to choose a seat..." She waited.